My name is Aram Ayra. I'm an educator and a city commissioner running for Riverside City Council Ward 2, and I live in the district in the university neighborhood. Thank you so much for this question. As a budget engagement commissioner, I've had a chance to really look deeply into Measure Z, the proposal that's before the council that just got approved and put on the ballot. I do think we have critical needs in our fire infrastructure and our need for hiring more firefighters. I support that completely. However, in going out and knocking thousands of doors across the community, residents have said time and time again that in this time of economic uncertainty, in this time of costs being sky high across every sector, housing, rent, food, childcare, they cannot afford to add another tax to that mix, no matter how small or big. This is something that they cannot afford. This is something that families on fixed incomes cannot stomach at this point in time. I do think, unfortunately, that Measure Z will not pass this election cycle. I think it would be prudent for us to bring it back as a special tax in the next election cycle, which requires a higher voter threshold, which actually specifies that the money be spent for very specific reasons and doesn't go into the general fund. I think this would be much better for residents. I think there would be a lot more trust and a lot more accountability. And lastly, I think we need to be honest about how we spent the money so far and make it super accessible for residents who want to know. We need to have a digital dashboard on the city website. We need to make this information public. I think residents just want to make sure that their taxes are being spent wisely and on the things that they voted for in the first place. Yeah, absolutely. I think a strong downtown is critical for any city. But unfortunately, what I've seen in the city of Riverside is that downtown gets prioritized over every other part of the city. And I say this as a Ward 2 resident that's lived in Ward 2 for over a decade. I've seen projects in downtown get priority, get the resources. I've seen council members almost brag about the fact that downtown gets the lion's share of resources. And that's understandable. Every city wants to have a vibrant and diverse and well-built downtown. However, we have a lot of other community centers across the city of Riverside, places like Canyon Crest Town Center, like the University Village in Ward 2, for instance, or on the western part of the city, which feels like completely left out of the process. Our La Sierra, our Arlington, and our Lanza folks that feel like none of the resources and none of the attention get directed there. That is not something that I think is acceptable, and I think we need to have a better equity and a better distribution of resources. And I support our downtown. I support our downtown businesses and community that have built it up. It's incredible. I know it's an attraction for people, but we're a huge city. We're over 330,000 people now. We have a lot of other community centers, cultural centers that we need to be investing in, developing in, and making sure that people don't just stay downtown and then leave Riverside. There's more to see, right, than downtown in Riverside. So I would say that a couple of the projects that I mentioned, building up some of our cultural centers in Ward 2, getting a community center for Ward 2. We're now, after redistricting, the only ward in the city that doesn't have a developed community center. In addition to bringing other businesses and retail spaces and other things into Canyon Crest Town Center, University Village, and some of the other locations in the ward. Absolutely. Well, most importantly, we have to understand the main cause of potholes, which is the incredible amount of truck traffic we have in Ward 2. I can speak for Ward 2 specifically. We have a lot of truck traffic that goes up Alessandro, goes up our major artery ways like Watkins and Big Springs and Spruce, and destroys the streets. At the same time, we're seeing a reality where the city has not updated its development impact fees in over a decade, which would offset some of those costs. Instead, we've passed those costs off to taxpayers, especially as we talked about earlier, through the form of Measure Z, which is then used to pay for these pothole damage. So for me, we've seen kind of a major impact from the warehouse industry. We've seen this increased truck traffic. We've seen this street and infrastructure damage. We've also seen at the same time a lack of prioritization of these large infrastructure projects. Like, for instance, for me, a priority would be the rail grade separations on Blaine Street and Spruce Street, which take away hours of productivity every single day from Riversiders. They slow down emergency services. These would be priorities for me to get built. I would love for us to revisit our development impact fees, make sure that warehouses and large companies are paying their fair share to offset the cost of the damage they cause to our streets, and at the same time be laser focused on-time maintenance so that we're not paying the deferred maintenance cost, which cost sometimes 2 to 3 times as much as if we had fixed it in the moment. I'm also big on expanding our 311 services app and making sure that more people are submitting it, getting the app refreshed and updated, getting the user interface more easy to use so that people can submit these requests and that we can get them fixed within a very short window of time. That's something I would be committed to as a council member. Sure. Well, let me start off by saying that I deeply disagreed with the council's vote to turn down $20 million from the state of California. I think it was a major misstep to apply for that grant and then to turn it down. I think it sent the wrong message to the state. It sent a wrong message to any affordable housing developers that Riverside is not the place to build. It also sent the wrong message to how we respond to homelessness as a community. Do we respond with compassion and actual investment and doing something to address it? Or do we say no, 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 and just turn down money and have no alternative to actually fix the problem? Now, in addition to that, in addition to supporting projects like that in the future, which I would do as a council member, and I believe I've been one of the few candidates in this race to be very public about, the other thing that I would really prioritize is making sure that we're stopping the influx of homeless dumping into the city of Riverside, making sure that we're holding places like Los Angeles and Orange County accountable for dropping off their homeless populations here in Riverside. I do think we need to take care of our neighbors first and prioritize getting them the resources and the housing that they need, the mental health and the substance abuse services that they need. I would also prioritize us rapidly building more temporary shelter for homeless people, especially flipping some of our existing vacant warehouses into actual shelter space that could house 100, 200 people at a time, and make sure that we're getting them off of the street and connected to resources and started on that continuum of care, which we talk about so much. And lastly, I would really prioritize implementing and better using the homeless management information system, which is a tracking system that actually tells us, are we investing properly? Are we helping people and actually the results are sticking? Have we helped someone 1 time, 5 times, or 15 times, and what has been effective and what has not been? The last thing I will say is I will work closely with our Inspector General to make sure that we are assessing how we've spent our homelessness funding, to make sure that the money is being used effectively, to make sure that the services that we're providing are actually being implemented properly. Yeah, so great question. I've been on the forefront of a lot of those discussions and I've stood with residents in trying to find solutions to bring it underground. At this point, I do believe the project has moved forward at a point where it would be very difficult to stop it. We've seen that, recently it was announced that they started actually building and implementing the RTRP infrastructure in Jurupa Valley and slowly moving closer to Riverside. If there would be opportunities for this discussion to come up in the future, I certainly would welcome any resident input. As I mentioned, I spent almost a year and a half being involved directly with that issue. But at this point in time, I think we need to laser focus on the things that we can definitely fix, especially around our affordability, around lowering the cost of living, around addressing some of the lack of accountability and trust that we have currently in City Hall. We've seen that there was an opportunity for City Hall to actually have that vote on RTRP, and instead they dismissed residents, they pushed back, they in some cases really misrepresented their positions on RTRP, especially after they got elected. That's unacceptable. I do think that we had an opportunity to potentially revisit that project earlier. At this point, it seems like it's moved forward quite a bit, but if there's opportunities to talk about that and connect with residents in the future, I certainly would welcome those. Constituents should vote for me because they deserve a fighter, someone that's unbought and unbossed in City Hall. I'm the only candidate in this race that's publicly rejected any corporate PAC money, warehouse developer money, or money from special interests, because I believe that our City Hall has become incredibly disconnected and just not in line with what residents want. There's been a lack of accountability, a lack of trust. If residents feel like their inputs haven't been heard recently, if they feel like their comments have fallen on uncaring ears, I would certainly want to change that. I've been very engaged in this community for a long time, for over 12 years now. I'm a product of our local education systems. I understand the city as a resident and as someone who has been active in the community for a long time. And I think we need someone in City Hall who's going to listen to residents, to hold the other council members accountable when they're voting against resident interests, when they're prioritizing their donors over their voters. And that's going to be me on the City Hall. And the last thing I want to say is I'm really fighting for working families in this city. I really am laser focused on lowering costs, on making Riverside more affordable, on making this a place that people can actually stay and build their families and afford to live instead of having to look to moving further east or out of state at a time when the economy is in shambles. So that's why residents should support me and vote for me on June 2nd.